Hello and welcome back to our IMF studio. I'm Charles Lichfield, Deputy Director of the Atlantic Council's GeoEconomics Center. Since we've been organizing these events on the sidelines of the IMF-World Bank Spring Meetings and annual meetings, it's also coincided with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And I think 3 times now, the Minister of Finance of Ukraine, Serhiy Marchenko, has taken some time out of his very busy schedule to speak to us. So we're very grateful, but this is the 3rd time, Mr. Minister. Thank you for coming to see us. So very briefly, I thought we'd discuss the slightly positive news for Ukraine's growth outlook in the WEO that came out today, and then we'll talk about some other items in the news, including on critical minerals. But first of all, I'd like to get your response to the slight uptick in GDP outlook and what you think this means for the fiscal outlook.
Thank you very much, Charles. It's important to admit that our macro stability is preserved because of financial aid we received from our partners. Also, we conduct very necessary policy to preserve this macro stability. We expected GDP growth this year will be up to 2.7%. We expected inflation will be lower than 10%. Right now it's high a little bit, but I think that our National Bank of Ukraine are able to manage inflation. Last year, GDP growth was 2.9%, and the key reason why it's below 3% is because of shortages of electricity, because of constant Russian attacks on our electricity grids, production capacity. It definitely influenced business, influenced people of Ukraine, but I haven't seen any reason to worry about growth this year. We see a lot of good signals. If you're talking about revenue mobilization, we mobilized 1 billion more in Q1 in comparison with plan we initially have. So I hope that this pace will be until the end of the year.
Understood. There was also some positive news in late March in your relationship with the IMF. The 7th review went well and they dispersed, I think, another tranche of about 500 million. I was just wondering what the conversation was like with the IMF about the future. I remember the first time we met, their scenarios were quite optimistic about ceasefires, and therefore they had these very positive outlooks for Ukrainian GDP, and sometimes this meant that you had to have a conversation with them about tempering their optimism a little bit. So where is that conversation now, and are there any disagreements that you may be having with the IMF?
Well, I haven't seen that we have some disagreements. It's a question that we already had 7 successful reviews, and now we're approaching to the 8th review. I haven't seen any specific problems, but you are right. When we approach into the end of the programs, we should address very challenging issue. Question of how long war will be among this question. The situation is quite uncertain right now. Nobody can predict, because we see a lot of signals of desire to structure a peace agreement. We are ready for such discussions, and Ukrainians are the most longing for a lasting peace for Ukraine. But at the same time, we see that it's not only we or the United States who are part of these discussions. Another part is Russia. They are not willing to ceasefire. They are not willing to find a peaceful resolution, and that's why it's not easy to predict.
Yep.
And it will be the kind of discussions which we'll have during next mission, to at least to craft some kind of scenarios for a future, specifically for 2026. Because if you look at our figures for 2026, we haven't collected enough commitments to cover our needs. It means that we should either to have very harsh landing,
yes,
which we would like to avoid, because we have some implication of macro situation, and we'll have different situation. Or we should find additional sources to cover our needs. And this is a key message which I deliver for my partners. With both scenarios, peaceful scenarios and wartime scenarios,
yes,
we need to find a solution for our deficit.
Understood. So the deficit, as far as I know now, is under 20%. So
19.4.
But you are fighting a war. I think under a ceasefire scenario, that would be expected to come down. But maybe one important message that I hear you've been delivering is also that in a ceasefire scenario, the people of Ukraine will expect their living standards to improve quite quickly, so there might be some pressures to spend even then.
Well, you're right. It could be some kind of expectations for reconstruction, expectations for higher social standards, etc. But it's not only that. It's also some kind of you can compress drastically military expenses even after the war. The waves of demobilization is not so welcome, let me say, for the Ministry of Finance. But that's why we should be very, very careful with necessary military expenses after the war.
Understood. I have two additional questions before you have to go off and to the rest of your busy schedule. The first is on the reconstruction scenario. Something that I'm a little bit concerned about is in a ceasefire scenario, there'll still be a lot of uncertainty. To attract investment to Ukraine, a lot of investors will want there to be viable insurance for the risk they're taking. For now, there isn't much of a political risk insurance market in Ukraine. I know that individual sovereigns are supporting individual projects, but an overall insurance market, there's a war right now, so that's difficult. But do you think one can be built in a ceasefire scenario?
Well, I hope that we'll have an opportunity to attract necessary investments.
Yeah.
We'll have this window.
The World Bank is helping you on this.
World Bank is helping us and other organizations as well. So we created necessary institutional capacity within the government. We have this public investment management structure. We implemented it, single project pipeline. We tried to show that we're transparent, we're accountable, but it's not enough. You're right that if we're talking about private investment. It should be some kind of solutions to provide necessary guarantees, insurance guarantees, political guarantees for business who probably would like to invest in Ukraine. And during the war, we tried to craft some ideas with different organizations. Unfortunately, there are only several successful projects which were implemented during the war. And of course, after the war, we expect some kind of higher level of proposition to invest in Ukraine. Well, let's see.
Well, we hope to help as the Atlantic Council. My colleague Olga, who's here, and I wrote a report on reconstruction which had some ideas, but not to minimize the size of the challenge. I think it would be remiss of me not to mention the memorandum of intent that was signed this week between Deputy Prime Minister Sviridenko and I think it was Treasury Secretary Bessent on critical minerals. So a memorandum of intent is not a memorandum of understanding, but I was pleased to see that the US government recognized a lot of Ukraine's concerns in at least this very short text. Ukrainian sovereignty, the pathway to EU membership, which seemed pretty important to me, but was wondering if you had any comment on this memorandum.
Well, it's a very delicate and sensitive issue for us. That's why I would like to avoid any specific comments. You are right, there are some progress in discussions, and I hope the team which are working closely with the United States team, they are moving forward and they have some kind of progress and reach some decisions later.
And one final question for you, which is in a way a tradition of ours when we meet at spring meetings and annual meetings. Russia's immobilized assets always come up. This year they aren't as present in the debate, I get the impression. Maybe one of the reasons is the successful ERA loans. So I was wondering if you could just update our audience on the disbursement of the 50 billion. Part of it is a US loan, part of it is an EU loan, but my understanding is that it will actually be used over several years, not just this year.
Well, you're right. We try to spread this ERA loans through the midterm perspective to meet our fiscal targets, and everything is in positive path. So we just finalized agreement with the Japanese government. It was our final G7 country with whom we are signing this agreement. So everything is in a good track, and I think that it's a good signal that if you already was able to withdraw interest from Russian assets is it not a good time to discuss seizure of
The principle.
Yeah.
Well,
From our perspective, it's a good time to discuss it, and we will raise this issue in different locations because we see the benefit would definitely, but it could be some kind of.
I'd like to take it further. So, wishing you much luck and many successes this week, Mr. Minister. Very grateful that you come to see us regularly, and hopefully we'll be talking about an even more optimistic scenario next time we meet. A durable ceasefire and a durable peace for Ukraine, and a fair one would be good too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, and back to the AC headquarters. Thank you.